living without meaning, and why that's okay. The search for meaning. For as long as I can remember, there's been a question quietly living in the back of my mind. It never screamed. It never demanded my attention. But it sat there, patiently, like a shadow that moves when you're not looking. The question was simple, but impossible to ignore. What's the point of all this? It's not the kind of question you ask out loud. It's not something you bring up at dinner or post about online. Most days, you don't even notice it's there, but it shows up in the quiet moments, when the noise fades, when success feels empty, or when the world feels unfair. It's there after a breakup, after failure, after a sleepless night spent wondering why everything feels disconnected. It's a question so many of us carry without realizing it. We grow up being taught that life has a script, that if we follow the rules, if we work hard, fall in love, build something, become someone, then meaning will appear like a prize at the end of the race. We're told there's a point to all this, a reason, a story with a clear beginning, middle, and happy ending. But then, life happens, and you start to notice the cracks in the script. You notice that good people suffer, that hard work doesn't always pay off, that love isn't always enough, and that no matter how much you try to control things, life remains unpredictable, unfair, and random. And when all the noise dies down, when there's no one left to impress, no one left to compare yourself to, sometimes there's only silence, a hollow, heavy silence underneath everything. That's when the question returns, stronger than before. What if none of this means anything? A long time, that question scared me. It felt like a black hole, like something I wasn't supposed to look at directly. Because what would happen if I did? What if the answer was exactly what I feared? But over time, something unexpected happened. I realized that I was already living inside a philosophy, one I had never chosen, one that had been quietly shaping my life. And chances are, you've been living inside it too. That philosophy is called Absurdism. Absurdism isn't about giving up. It's not about darkness, despair, or nihilism. It's about confronting the uncomfortable truth that the universe doesn't owe us meaning. There is no cosmic rulebook, no hidden purpose written in the stars. The world isn't here to reward you for your efforts or punish you for your mistakes. It's simply. But here's the twist, and it's the part that changed everything for me. That realization isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning. Absurdism isn't an invitation to collapse. It's an invitation to create. To stop searching for meaning like a lost object, and instead start building it yourself, piece by piece, even in a universe that might never give you a reason why. So in this video, we're going to talk about what it means to live without meaning, and why that might be the most powerful, freeing thing you'll ever do. Because maybe, just maybe, the most beautiful rebellion you can choose is to wake up in a meaningless universe and live meaningfully anyway. What absurdism really means. When people first hear the idea that life has no inherent meaning, it sounds dark. It sounds like a void, like the kind of thought that would make you want to give up. But that's not the message of absurdism. It's not a philosophy of despair. It's a philosophy of honesty. Absurdism starts with one unavoidable observation. The world doesn't make sense. We, as human beings, crave meaning. We want there to be a reason why we're here, why things happen, why good and bad come to us in patterns we can control. But the universe doesn't operate by those rules. It doesn't speak our language. It doesn't offer explanations. The philosopher Albert Camus described this conflict as the absurd. The clash between our deep human need for meaning and the cold, silent indifference of the universe. That tension, that gap, is where absurdism lies. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's in the randomness of life. How accidents happen to people who don't deserve them. Hard work doesn't guarantee success. Love doesn't always last. It's in the moments when everything you thought would make you happy leaves you feeling empty. When the world seems to keep moving without giving you a reason why. And when you recognize that absurdity, you're faced with a choice. The first option is what many people fall into without realizing it: nihilism. The belief that if life has no meaning, then nothing matters. That there's no point in trying, in caring, in hoping. That you may as well give up. But absurdism offers a second option, one far more difficult, but infinitely more courageous. Instead of collapsing under the weight of meaninglessness, you can rebel against it. Camus called this the revolt, the quiet personal rebellion of continuing to live, to choose to care, even when you know the universe is indifferent. It's not about pretending there's a grand plan. It's about acknowledging that there isn't, and showing up anyway. Absurdism doesn't tell you to give up. It tells you to live without illusions, to see the chaos, the randomness, the unfairness, and still choose to keep going, to create meaning, not because it was handed to you, but because you decided it matters anyway. And here's the thing most people don't realize. You've probably been doing this all along. Every time you've gotten out of bed on a day that felt meaningless, every time you've laughed in the middle of grief, every time you've helped someone, loved someone, built something, even though you knew it wouldn't last forever, that was your quiet rebellion against the absurd. Absurdism isn't a philosophy for philosophers. It's for anyone who has ever felt the weight of existence and kept moving anyway. It's for anyone who has stared into the void and decided to plant flowers there. So, when we talk about living without meaning, we're not talking about despair. We're talking about freedom. The freedom to stop waiting for permission. The freedom to stop searching for a cosmic script that doesn't exist, and to start writing your own. And in the next part of this video, I want to show you how I realized this in my own life. How, without knowing it, I'd been living this rebellion for years. My personal journey. For most of my life, I didn't have a name for what I was feeling. I didn't know there was a philosophy behind it, or that thinkers like Camus had wrestled with the same questions long before I ever did. I just knew that something felt off, like I was chasing a script that never quite fit me. Growing up, I believed what most of us are taught to believe, that if I worked hard, if I checked the right boxes, happiness and meaning would follow. So I did what I was supposed to do. I studied, I worked, I set goals. I told myself that once I hit certain milestones, everything would make sense. Once I had the right job, the right relationship, the right life, the question in the back of my mind would finally disappear. But it didn't. Even when things were good, when I had achievements to show, people who cared about me, moments that should have felt fulfilling, there was always an echo of emptiness underneath it all. A feeling that no matter how much I built, something was missing, and I couldn't explain why. For a while, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was ungrateful or broken, or just incapable of feeling the way I was supposed to feel. Everyone else seemed to be living their lives without questioning the script. Why couldn't I? It wasn't until I hit a particularly low point, when everything I thought I wanted felt meaningless, that I began to question the script itself. That's when I stumbled across absurdism, not in a classroom, not in some academic essay, but in the messy, disorienting experience of my own life. And when I finally put a name to it, everything clicked. Absurdism wasn't telling me something new. It was giving me language for something I had already been living. I realized that my entire life had been a series of quiet rebellions against the absurd, even if I didn't recognize it at the time. Every time I failed and decided to try again anyway. Every time I invested in a friendship or a project or a dream, knowing full well that it could fall apart. Every time I laughed on a day that felt too heavy for joy. Every time I allowed myself to care, even when it would have been easier not to. All of those moments were acts of defiance. Small, almost invisible rebellions against the randomness, the unfairness, the meaninglessness of life. I wasn't waiting for the universe to give me a reason. I was quietly, stubbornly creating my own. And here's the part that surprised me the most. Those small rebellions didn't fix everything. They didn't make the question go away, but they made the question less important. Because once you stop looking for meaning like a prize at the end of the race, you start to see it everywhere, in places you never thought to look. In the way the light hits your window on a quiet afternoon, in a conversation that makes you laugh until your stomach hurts, in the simple, fragile act of showing up for yourself and the people you love, even when it feels like nothing matters. Absurdism taught me that I didn't have to solve the question of meaning. I just had to live despite it. And the more I leaned into that rebellion, the lighter everything felt. Not because life became easier, but because I stopped fighting the fact that life didn't come with answers. Maybe you felt it too. That weight, that question, that feeling that nothing makes sense. If you have, I want you to know, you're not broken. You're not lost. You're standing at the edge of the absurd, whether you realize it or not. And the fact that you're still here, still breathing, still trying, still searching, means you've already chosen to rebel. The power of choosing anyway. So here we are, at the edge of that question, the one that lives quietly in the back of so many minds. The question that feels too heavy to hold but too real to ignore. What if none of this means anything? It's tempting to believe that question is a dead end, that once you face it, you'll fall into despair, lose your way, or stop caring. But what I've learned, what absurdism taught me, is that it's not an ending. It's an invitation. When you realize that life has no script, that the universe isn't here to hand you a reason or reward you for your efforts, you're left with something far more powerful than certainty. You're left with freedom. The freedom to stop waiting for permission to live. The freedom to stop chasing meaning like a prize at the end of the race. The freedom to write your meaning, quietly, imperfectly, beautifully, even if no one else ever sees it. That freedom isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. Most of the time, it looks like small, ordinary choices. Getting up when you don't want to. Showing kindness when it's not required. Laughing in the middle of the chaos. Loving someone, even though you know you could lose them. Those moments might not seem like much, but they are everything. They are how you rebel against the absurd. How you turn meaninglessness into meaning. Not because the universe gave it to you, but because you decided it mattered. So, I want to leave you with a question. What is one thing you've kept doing, even when it felt meaningless? Maybe it's showing up for a friend. Maybe it's working on something no one else understands. Maybe it's simply getting out of bed when everything feels heavy. Whatever it is, that's your quiet rebellion. That's your reminder that you are more powerful than the chaos around you. If this video spoke to you, I'd love for you to share your answer in the comments. Not just for me, but for the people watching who might feel like they're standing at the edge of the absurd, wondering what to do next. And if you found something here that made you pause, reflect, or feel a little less alone, hit subscribe and like the video. Because these conversations aren't over. There's so much more to say.